everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode 158. As we sit here after last week's episode, wallowing in our hands over the England defeat to Wales, which
Whoa, go Wales!
which a large majority of you podcast listeners don't care about. But being a rugby player, and Rachel being a Welshie and a background of rugby, we care a lot.
Oh, what a weekend! Oh my god, I'm still on a massive high. I was going to say I'm starting to see it come down a bit now, but I'm not. What a weekend and what a game! I think Wales just properly showed that true heart and passion. And I'm not going to go on about it too much because I know I've given you a lot of stick over the past couple of days, Ben, for England losing, and I know that you were quite upset. We'll just use the word upset about this.
Well, I wasn't upset. I was angry, but I mean, let's look at, because this is a fitness and nutrition podcast, right? So let's look at the dynamics of, this is a sport. It's a very high-profile sport. It's in our home country. 450 million people tuned into the opening of the World Cup. It's a big event. Eyes are on it. And when you look at the fitness, mindset, physiology components of this sport, which is rugby, we can start, and this is read in the papers, if you've been reading the papers about the kind of rugby and what happened with England and Wales, there's a couple of components where we can look at the game and say, right, England I think they were like 13 points up at one point, and then, Wales slowly crept back and won it. Now, there's a couple of things, people were saying that Wales were a lot fitter, and I think they were. I think that was shown in the last sort of 30, 20 minutes where they had a lot more in the engine. Whether England went quiet because of a fitness thing or a mindset thing, they almost got complacent. But, if we start to draw comparisons to our everyday life, like we've got the 20 best teams in the world playing rugby together in England right now. And I always say that, within reason, bearing in mind a couple of teams, because a couple of teams have really turned up to make up the numbers, anyone can beat anyone. And it comes down to mindset, physical preparation, how people are going into the game, communication, teamwork. And if you can relay so much of those things to life lessons, like what we do in the gym, how we approach things in life, whether we're disciplined enough to kind of reach our goals and fulfill the expectations we have on ourselves. Because right now, England have a huge amount of expectation on themselves. We put a lot of expectation on ourselves as individuals. And I just think there's actually a lot of parallels that we can draw of our own life and what happens in pro sport.
It was a monumental occasion. I mean, massive, and again, you're absolutely right. The best teams in the world playing. It's hosted in the UK, and I think it's absolutely amazing. So whether you're a rugby fan or not, my mum's not a massive rugby fan, but she watched the game, and I think that it's like the saying goes: if somebody's passionate about something, it doesn't matter what they're passionate about. It's really interesting. So when you have an environment like that, it is very infectious, and you do get into it, even if you're not into the rugby. But amazing game. I'm not going to go on about it, but I'm very proud to be Welsh, and it was a very good game.
Yeah, whatever. So moving on.
I just loved, I just couldn't wait to post something on your Facebook wall. As soon as the final whistle went, I was like, yes! Get my phone, I was like, gotta message Ben.
Yeah, appreciated that text. I'm not that bitter. Right, let's do that nutrition and fitness thing. Let's run into the show.
We got a couple of good questions today. Before that, have you got any news that you want to share?
I don't think so. 14th and 15th of November is going to be the Body Type Nutrition Conference. The details will go up very soon online. In fact, they probably would have gone up before this show goes up. So come and join us November 2015 in Manchester, 14th and 15th of November. Come and learn some amazing stuff. We're even going to have guest speakers this year. It's going to be a very good event. Keep an eye out on social media. Apart from that, that's kind of it in my world.
The 14th, 15th of November. Sweet. I'm back in the UK then, so I will be coming.
Oof.
I'll sit in the front row and be very well behaved.
Right, let's get into the show.
Awesome. Okay, so this first question is from Nick. Hi Ben and Rachel. I've been a listener for quite some time, but I haven't bothered to write at any point. Just one of those silent critics in the background, although generally a very supportive one. The show is excellent. I'm not sure I'm ready to put myself up with the photos and all their gory details just yet, but your podcast just now was really great, so I thought I'd drop you a line to tell you about the journey that I've been on since about this time last year. I just turned 40, and a year ago I was in the process of moving house from the suburbs to the middle of London. My first attempt at buying went badly. Cue an expensive and very disruptive short-term move, where health was anything but a priority, lots of booze, late nights, and generally escaping from the shitty reality. Whilst I didn't think that I was in too bad a state, I was still wanting to make a real change in my health and appearance. I signed up with various trainers at commercial gyms like David Lloyd, lots of money spent, no results. Knowing what I know now, their knowledge of training and nutrition was pretty poor, but mine was worse, so I was spending the money for nothing. One morning on the way to work, I was looking for a new podcast when I was looking for a new podcast to keep me entertained, I came across Phil Learney's on iTunes. This bloke seemed to know what he was talking about on the few shows that were released, and I started to do some research. It turned out he was now working in London, and I tried to find the gym he was at in order to sign up as a client. I was that inspired. He was working at UP, as you know, but not taking on clients at the time. I signed on instead with a trainer at the UP City branch, and I did the initial assessment. Oh dear, just under 25% body fat at about 80 kilos or so, and that was in late March. I've had a few ups and downs since then, some time in hospital due to a bizarre tropical infection, lots of time travelling, and general problems in life getting in the way, job, etc. Fast forward to December 2014. 2 weeks ago, I reached my goal of 10% body fat, and I feel pretty awesome, as you would say. I've done this pretty much through clean eating, single ingredient foods, and learning how to eat properly again. I'm so much stronger and can hammer out chins and pull-ups when doing a single one was a pipe dream, and now I'm starting to reverse diet and get my hormones back into a better state. It's not been without its negative side effects, as I'm sure you know. I bought Phil's book on nutritional programming, and I'm over halfway through it, and it does make a lot of sense now. Sorry for the ramble. I really wanted to give you and people like Phil and all the trainers at places like UP a proper shout out for managing to help turn around people's lives. If you did want some help in the mission, let me know. I'm not sure I'm in budgie smuggler condition just yet though. All the best and keep up the good work, Nick.
Joe, the reason why I put this in here is because over the last couple of podcasts we've talked quite a bit about Plan B. And an awful lot of people have a Plan A. The expectation is that works, but what happened when life throws things at us? Nick has been through an awful lot. The changes in jobs, the rough, get himself into a state, a few rough times, a tropical infection, all this kind of stuff. And that's when you get thrown off your game. You're not able to do stuff. You're not able to stick to the plan. And I think what's important, and this is obviously what Nick's done, is he's accepted the fact that it's not going to be perfect. Right, I've got this thing to deal with. In fact, fitness and health isn't my priority right now. I'll try and do my best, but I know it's not a priority. I'm going to focus on this thing in front of me. I'm going to get it done. Might take a month. Chances are I'm going to be back a little bit. I'm going to have to regress and move forward again. But it's not the end of the world. What's in front of me right now is the most important thing in my life. And ultimately, we're getting to the point, and I've said it a lot recently, about life, about all the things that we do moving into in a positive way to affect our life. And sometimes when life gets in the way, life is the focus. Our life isn't health and fitness. Health and fitness contributes to a better life. And I just think what Nick's sort of shown here is a real hunger to keep developing, but understanding that things will get in the way, and he's happy to keep learning and kind of trundling along, and when he's there in a good place, then he'll really accelerate with things, and then when he won't, then he'll just drop back, try and hit maintenance, accept that, almost create a new Plan A within Plan B, and then accelerate back into the ideal Plan B. And I just think it's a real nice testimonial to having that mindset that allows you flexibility in kind of like a macro cycle of your health and fitness across the course of a year, to 5 years.
I pulled up something else out of this as well, and I was having this conversation with somebody on the weekend actually, and that's the difference between a personal trainer and a professional trainer. And there are some very good personal trainers out there, but there is a distinct difference between somebody who may be working in a general commercial club. And look, I know some fantastic personal trainers that work at commercial clubs, but we do know that some trainers aren't in it for the right reasons, and they don't know very much about training and nutrition. And if you're a trainer listening to this podcast, you're obviously not one of them because you're doing something to
Rachel,
develop your skills.
Rachel, you keep rustling something in front of your microphone. It's really loud.
I'm not rustling anything.
Okay, carry on.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what it is. My hands are free. I have a pen.
Oh, okay.
Has it gone?
Yeah.
Okay. Where was I?
You're obviously not listening to this podcast if you're one of those trainers.
Yeah. So, if you listen to this podcast, you're obviously very interested in your job and what you're doing. But we do know that there is a distinct difference between, you turn up to a training session and your personal trainer says, right, we're training chest today, and then basically finds the equipment that is free in a gym to train that particular body part, or just basically does a mishmash of things just because you've just turned up and it's basically done on the fly. Whereas a professional trainer will have spent a lot of time working with you, assessing you, looking at what you've done in the past, and basically taking you through step by step on a guided program that had been previously written but can be adapted on the fly. And that's the distinct difference between the two, I think. And so, it's great that Nick has basically worked with professional trainers and has actually got some results.
One thing we've also mentioned a couple of times recently, and really over the course of this podcast, is knowing when to accept that you don't have the knowledge and the power to achieve what you want to achieve. So, Nick got himself into a spot, moved to London, thought, right, now's the time, I'm going to hire a coach. The coach is there to get me back on board, really support my goals. And I think that's really key. I mean, we get so many questions into the podcast that have kind of been asked before, and obviously I don't want to go over old ground, and people are kind of almost looking for a life assessment by writing into the podcast, and I quite often just reply, I'm like, look, I really think you just need a coach, even if it's for a month. It's like just to get your thoughts together, kind of debunk some stuff, because a coach has the power to align your thoughts and fill you with confidence, and a lot of the time you just need someone to go, do you know what you're doing is actually the right thing. You just need to keep going. You just need to be consistent and stay with it. And yes, I agree that a lot of people have been burnt because they've hired a bad coach, given them a bad experience, and they've thought, fuck it, I'm going to do it myself. I don't have confidence in PT. So I think that's why it's good to, ask people like me and Rachel who and where they think a good coach is. Make sure you do your due diligence. Ask around. If I was to recommend an online nutrition coach, then I'd obviously recommend all the coaches that are a body type nutrition. I have faith in their ability because they've come through our school of teaching. They are fantastic practitioners. Same with trainers. We have an online gym directory at Body Type Nutrition. You can go on and look at gyms that we recommend and stuff. That's if you trust my opinion. If you don't trust my opinion, then go and find someone that you value and say, do you know what, I'd really like a recommendation. Can you help me? So it's just knowing when to take that step, because sometimes we just need a little nudge, a little direction, a little structure.
And a bit of clarity. And I'm just going to digress just slightly here after an email I received yesterday from a girl. And I get the same things. I could probably categorize every inquiry email into probably 4 or 5 categories. And every single one, actually probably less, 3 categories. It fits into one of those 3. And I get sometimes emails that are pages and pages and pages long. And I look at the whole email and it's basically this elaborate story. And I come to the end of it and I'm like, okay, what's the point of this email? I get lost in it. And the basic point is that this girl has got really confused with the training. She's doing way too much. She can't, and it's fat loss. She wants to lose fat. She wants to be leaner. That is the end of it. And so she fits into this exact category. And as women in particular, you come up with all of these elaborate stories and excuses and the way that these things are written. honey, you're no different to anybody else. You're not a special flower. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to come out and say it. Nothing is special and nothing is different about you. You are going to fit into one of those three categories. And unfortunately, most women are not prepared to do the work that it takes to get the result they want. So I don't know why I went there. It was just, I guess, taking from what you just said about just needing clarity. Now, I've worked with girls like that in the past, and I've been very, obviously, in my typical manner, very direct with them, giving them some clarity. They understand it, and then bang, light goes off in their head, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. It's not confusing anymore. I can do that. So it's massively worth the investment, even if it's just a couple of sessions. Do a month of coaching with somebody, and you can learn a lot.
I think I mentioned on the last podcast about when people come for a mentorship day with me, they might book a half day, and a lot of the time they'll come with a massive list of questions, and I'll only spend 2.5 hours with them instead of 4, because they'll have so much in their head, and all I have to do is say a couple of key things, give them a couple of key bits of information, and it all fits into place. And a lot of the time what we're talking about is people that are really clued up, but they read so much and they've been so pickled about all the information that they read that you do literally need a half an hour with the coach, and he might only give you 1, maybe 2 pieces of advice, but that should bring it all together. It just literally boils it all down.
Absolutely. And if your coach can't explain something simply, I'm just going to say that it might be, time to find another coach. So if you have coaches, because there are coaches out there who make things very, very complicated, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. This is supposed to be simple. If you, as a coach, if there are trainers on the line, make things very simple for your clients, one step at a time.
I think really this could be a take-home lesson for a lot of people. If there's people sitting there trying to work out their next move, they've got all these variables, they're confused, the answer will often lie in the simplest route. Whether it's fat loss, right? Do you have an appropriate calorie deficit? Are you eating enough protein? Are you sleeping right? Are you training effectively? Do you have a lot of stress on your plate? Are you hydrated enough? Do you sleep at the right time? Like all these things. Like I was talking to a friend today, and he was going through a big elaborate explanation of all this client about why they can't lose body fat, and I was like, 2 things. Sounds like there's emotional stress and they're not sleeping. And he was like, oh yeah, they're barely sleeping at all, and husband's just cheated on her. And I'm like, mate, that's a lot of stuff to deal with. Like, it doesn't matter if your diet's on point, your training's on point, your body is going to be hugely affected by that, and you're just not in a place to get results when you need to deal with that stuff. You need to get yourself mentally back on track. So sometimes if you're pickled with this stuff, just look at the simplest, the part of the equation that is just not quite in line with the simple theories that we know are 100% true, concrete, and should guide us 95% of the time.
Absolutely. And I've, again, like I digressed a little bit, I've actually changed my stance a lot over the past 6 to 8 months on female fat loss, and for various different reasons, and the majority of which is that I've actually had better results with clients when I actually don't prescribe interval training that much to my female clients anymore. Whereas I used to be a massive advocate of interval training, and I'm not saying that don't do it. I think it's great. But interval training is fantastic if you're not stressed. But if you have a client come to you, and I deal with a lot of high stress women for various different reasons, most of which is mental and emotional stress. Same thing, body deals with it in exactly the same way. I actually take interval training off them, and I massively reduce their training volume, and I get them walking. And I get a lot of my clients say to me, oh, but is that it? But yes, that is it. Sometimes I have them eat more, sometimes I have them eat less, but that's really probably something quite significant that's changed in my programming over the past 6 to 8 months. And look, it's perhaps because my clientele has changed. I'm working with a lot more like sort of high-flying corporate girls, professional women who are in a stressful environment, and also like women who have had a lot of binge eating disorders, and that's massively stressful on the body. So my approach has changed somewhat, but please, anyone listening to this, don't think I'm saying anything bad about interval training. I think it's fantastic, and if you're if your body is able to cope with it, and we've got stress levels under control, then interval training, awesome, keep going. But my approach now with my girls who have a lot more stress in our lives is very much weight training based, moderate volume, walking, and a balanced nutritional plan that's full of nutritious food.
I think that's really interesting, because if we look at the context of what interval training does and how you perform it, like interval training is a very intensive form of exercise. It's powerful, it's often explosive, it's repeated, and if you do it properly, it should almost make you feel a bit nauseous. Like in your rest period, you're sat there going, "Oof, like another one." And you're like, "Yeah, another one." You've got 45 seconds on the clock. Get ready, because you're going again. And it's interval training should be about 20-25 minutes. Now, training like that is very stressful. Like if I go out and do 10, 12 hill sprints, I really know about it. Like I'm going to feel a little bit, I'm going to need some extra recovery in there. I'm not going to want to do a weight session in the evening. That's not going to pan out well. Now, we are currently trying to work with clients, and I don't know anyone that comes to me that hasn't got too much stress on their plate. And remember, when we talk about stress, we mean sleep, too much work, spiritual, emotional, mental, food stress, all this stuff goes into the basket. And if, Rachel, if you're talking about people that are high flying in London, they're some of the most stressful people. They've got performance targets with their work. They're often only sleeping 5 hours a night instead of 7. They're burning the wick at both ends a bit. And actually, probably the worst thing that they can do is go in, and I know it's attractive because it saves time. We can do a 20-30 minute interval session, and calorically, bang for buck, it could be the same as a 45 minute cardio session, but actually that added stress is just something that's going to help tip them over the edge. And actually 40 minutes on the cross trainer might be the perfect thing.
Maybe, and it's the kind of thing like you can zone out. And I'm a big advocate of walking. I try and get my clients out walking a lot, and it's very much to try and get them out of that state. I get them listening to audiobooks, podcasts, etc. So it's it's certainly something that I've changed over the past couple of months.
Anyway, Nick wrote in, didn't even ask a question, and we've just digressed for 20 minutes.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Let's get back on track.
And awesome work, Nick. Well done for reaching your goals, buddy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this next question is from Lee. Hi, Ben. Lately I've been working with a few combat sports athletes during strength conditioning and also nutrition. Through working with them for long periods of time, I've noticed they find it difficult to lose weight for their weigh-in. I assume that this is because they are suffering from metabolic damage, as their previous nutrition has been horrendous, with eating little portions and such as consuming 500 calories a day, when they're also training twice a day in the same day. They prefer to dehydrate before weigh-ins, which I'm totally against. I have tried to increase their meal frequency by making them eat whole foods, and also to increase their carbohydrates after training to blunt cortisol levels, but still calculating their energy deficit in order to make weight. Have you got any recommendations to improve metabolic damage in order to make weight easier? In order to make weight easier to lose. In addition, do you know of any short-term strategies to lose weight safely? Many thanks, Lee. P.S. Can you shout out to Edge Gyms in Leeds where you did your photo shoot?
Well, for a start, you just gave your own shout out, so...
I just read what's in front of me. Like, you put stuff on a tele... Like, through my media training, like, I'm sure, like, the boys take the piss sometimes because they put stuff on the teleprompter and I just read it. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, you dickheads, all of you. You're just making me say shit that I don't need to say now. So I just read what's in front of me.
In that case, I might stitch you up next podcast.
Well, you've stitched me up too many times before. Remember when you cut and paste that one email and I was like, nah.
Whoa. That's the guy that wrote in's fault. No, I should have edited that better. Yeah, Edge Gym in Leeds. That is a good gym. I've trained there before. Very good gym if you live in Leeds. So this is interesting, and with any sport, the primary thing is performance, and the real unfortunate thing with fight sports is that we have a weight component, and people spend let's say 6 months focusing on the performance element, which is not the wrong thing to do, that's the right thing to do to a degree, and then they get 4-6 weeks out and go, shit, this guy's 68 kilos and he's fighting at 63. I've got to get 5 kilos off him in 5 weeks, because they've kind of negated the performance and maybe not controlled the nutritional intake well enough. So Lee asked, have you got any recommendations to improve metabolic damage in order to make weight easier? Well, yeah. And then he says, in addition, do you know any short-term strategies to lose weight safely? Well, no. Fast weight loss is relatively unsafe. Like, there's going to be some repercussions to that. You're going to get a faster down regulation of metabolic rate. You're going to have a decrease in performance. You're going to have all these things that we expect. If fast weight loss was safe, we wouldn't see all these problems that people have with being on, yo-yo diets and doing all this crazy stuff with their health. So, no, and this is my perspective with fight sports, and Rachel can chip in afterwards, because, she's probably worked with more fighters than I ever have in my life. But if we've got a macro training cycle, let's say it's 6 or 9 months, I would want that fighter to operate as close to their fight weight as possible most of the time throughout the year, because that's healthy and it's easy to maintain weight. It's a lot harder to lose weight and still keep up with your performance demands. So if I'm working with a fighter right now who's 68 kilos and needs to fight at 63, and I've got 6 months with them, I'm like, right, your training isn't intense yet. You're not starting to really build up like into the fight and really push yourself. Now is the perfect time to lose fat. Let's get a load of fat off you. Let's start fighting at like 64, maybe even less, depending on how that pans out, how much fat they actually have to lose. And then let's ramp it up and let's increase your performance while keeping your body weight. And if we have to get a little bit funky closer to the time, it should be easy, because all I've got to do is play around with a kilo or two. And that's fairly easy, especially with a little bit of water manipulation. So for me, fight sport needs to change their culture. They need to think way more in advance rather than shitting themselves and going, oh God, I've got to drop 5 kilos in 5 weeks. Because no one can do that healthily, and you impair their performance on the day.
100% agree. And having worked with Warrior and managed MMA gyms, I've probably done certainly a good 7 years of dealing with MMA fighters, and it's certainly changing. And I think Australia is it's certainly changing in the more professional fighters in Sydney. One person that it would be good for Lee to follow, if he doesn't already, is Mike Dolce. He's actually Ronda Rousey's nutritionist. So he has obviously done a lot of work in MMA. He is an amazing character. He's very good at what he does, and he produces some amazing information. So he's one person that he should follow. I have a very general rule, and that's that I don't particularly, I don't like my fighters to be any more than sort of 5 to 6 kilos over their fight weight. Having said that, some of the big boys slightly different. It can be up to 8 kilos. But generally, I personally like to work with about a 5 kilo rule. 3 kilos is easy to get off somebody, particularly during a fight camp. They're quite intense. Like, naturally, generally, the fighters will drop weight, and it is something that done safely, it's fine to do a little bit more water manipulation to just get rid of the last 1 to 2 kilos. I don't see a problem with that, as long as you're not cutting out sodium, and it's not too much of a long dehydration process. Really, by the time we've just done, we've cut water generally the night before, really just sip water that following day, perhaps have a Epsom salt bath. That's usually enough to get a good 1.5 to 2 kilos out of. If they don't make weight, generally most of my fighters do make weight. If they don't make weight, generally it's a quick run in the sweat tracksuit for about 10 minutes, 20 minutes to start sweating. It does come off very easily, and it's very easy then to rehydrate. So I'm obviously not a fan of dehydration. It doesn't feel very nice. Anybody who's dehydrated knows what that feels like. It just feels awful. So as best we can, try and bring the fighter in actually on weight.
Mm. Yeah, it's one of those interesting sports where there's a huge amount of old school stuff, and I know it's really slowly coming around, but like I see people in the gym that I train in doing the stuff that I used to do boxing a bit at uni, and the stuff that coach used to teach me. Some of the stuff I had to sort of suck it up and just say, look, that what we know has moved on way past that, and all the little training techniques they're doing, all the little kind of moves and stuff is kind of their conditioning. I'm like, you do that already in your boxing training, and then you're kind of replicating it in the gym too much. So it's interesting. It is a sport that is very sluggish.
It is, and the interesting thing is that it used to be one of those things, particularly boxers, used to be tradition that they used to have to go out for like 5 to 10k run every morning, and boxers don't do any slow and steady state. And then it went the other way, and then then we had the influx of interval training, and nobody was doing any form of like longer conditioning anymore. So I think there needs to be somewhere in the middle there.
Nice. So, interesting.
Hopefully that helps, Lee, but it's one of those things, unfortunately. If somebody has had a bit of a yo-yo dieting history, mosquito in my face. If somebody has had a bit of a yo-yo dieting history, then yes, it does take time to reboot the metabolism. But again, like any athlete, they should perform and train like an athlete. There's no reason, and this extends to bodybuilding and figure. There's no reason to be fluctuating 20 plus kilos on and off season.
Totally.
Next question. This question is from James in Sussex. Hi Ben, you're a legend. Quick question, if I may. Magnesium is important, but it gives me the, apologise for swearing, the shits. To be clear, this is when I supplement. So, for example, I can't take it. Otherwise,
I can't take the otherwise amazing
CNS recovery because of the side effect. What else can I do to ensure I get enough? Much appreciated, James.
Interesting. That could maybe indicate that James has already got enough magnesium in his diet, and the supplement is kind of almost tipping him over the edge. But I've never really heard of a normal therapeutic dose, maybe around 300 to 400 milligrams a day orally, to cause that to happen. It can definitely happen at higher doses. Like magnesium is a muscle relaxant; it will relax the bowels. So if you're struggling with that personally, and if you want more, if you feel you have more, if it feels it has a positive effect, then I would get it transdermally. It's an effective way of delivering it. You can use my recovery spray, transdermaltechnology.co.uk. You can use salt baths. You can use different companies' products, whatever. But if you want the magnesium, then that would be my way to do it. But I would also test whether it is having an effect on your recovery, because you might find that actually your training doesn't deplete it that much, and you find it doesn't help your recovery that much. So it might be a supplement that you don't actually need. But if you do use it transdermally and find a positive effect, then I would use it, because I do find it is a compound that most people that train intensely lack.
If you're wondering if you have got enough magnesium, you just need to go to the doctor next time you go and just ask for just a basic blood test of red blood cell magnesium. Most doctors, well, certainly in Australia, most doctors will do that for you. It's a very straightforward, and it's a relatively inexpensive test to have done, so it might be something worth looking into.
Could do, yeah.
Next question. I love this question. This is from Gareth. Hi Ben, what's your opinion on compound exercises versus isolation exercises, and which do you prefer?
So we'll assume that Gareth is asking this from a kind of bodybuilding physique perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's our assumption. Now, Rachel, you said you love this question. Do you want to lead in? You sound a little bit excited.
Well, we could do an entire podcast on this.
We could.
I think they're both equal, and depending on the circumstances. So I'm very much, obviously, for fat loss and strength, and actually hypertrophy, massive fan of compound exercises. But personally, if I'm going to build a physique, I also very much like to include isolation exercises. So as an example, particularly the glutes, I do use a lot of isolation work in addition to squatting, deadlifting, hip thrusting, etc. The other time I would use a lot of isolation work would be in a rehab setting. And also I do use isolation work with beginners, which is a little bit, that's potentially a little bit different to what a lot of trainers do. So if I have a beginner and one of the first things that I do with them, the first couple of weeks, I try and teach them to contract a muscle and trying to hold tension. So I will do a lot of isolation work with them. I'll do bicep curls, I'll do tricep extensions, I'll do lateral raises, I'll do lying leg curls, I'll do quad extensions. I will do things that make the muscle burn. And I'll say to the client, where do you feel this working? And it's basically my way of teaching somebody how to contract a muscle. So that's why I like isolation work. And I do think that it does, they are the icing on the cake to develop a very well-rounded physique and also to dot the I's and cross the T's in a rehabilitative setting, in a nutshell.
Well, context is always the most important thing in this. And if you look at this from a bodybuilding perspective, yes, for example, the bench press works, the arms, the chest, the shoulders, all that kind of stuff. And that's perfect because we need to integrate movements. And this is why a lot of the time you'll see a training program and it will start off with some compound lifts, some big bang for your buck exercises, and then it will move to some more isolation based stuff, look at really contracting muscle, fatiguing certain areas of the body, because ultimately muscle building comes from overload and progressive weight and volume. So you need to look at it. If you always did compound exercises, there's going to be certain tissues that won't get enough stimulus. You won't fatigue those fibers enough, so the next day he comes back stronger and bigger, which is kind of the aim. So there's definitely an argument for both. And even when we look at individuals, we might change things again. So if we have someone that really struggles to even contract their pecs properly, they've got a bit of a problem with the insertion of their shoulder, we might actually spend some time at the beginning of the workout working on contraction, like really getting the pec to fire, maybe getting and loosening off at one or two muscles that are tight and they're starting to dominate a movement. And then you can go into a compound exercise and the chances are you would recruit more of the muscles that you want to work because you've taken away some of the imbalance and some of the recruitment issues. So I think it also comes down to the person and the order you want to do things. Like there'll be days where I will just go and do isolation based stuff purely because I want to work on simple hypertrophy and that's it. Now, as soon as we start to cross the barriers between bodybuilding and performance or sport-based training, then there needs to be a lot more integrative training because that's the environment that they have to perform in. So doing stuff like deadlifts, squats, all that kind of stuff has a better carryover to the sport environment. Just training the pec through a fly movement is not going to be as beneficial to that sporting realm. So again, it's all context. And ultimately, if you're a bodybuilder, what do you want? You want overload on certain muscles, and isolation is the perfect way to do it, whether that's free weight, barbell machine, cable, bands, isometrics.
That is all. I have nothing further to say, otherwise we will go on for a long time.
Yeah. We'll can it at that.
Enough. This question is from Cody, and it's the last question we have today. So, hi Ben, I really respect yours and Rachel's opinion on all things fitness and nutrition related. You guys are the first people I thought of when thinking of this question, as you've really helped me with a question in the past as well. What are your thoughts on HMB supplementation? After hearing about this when reading into a study done by Dr. Jacob Wilson, it seems pretty promising compared to your typical BCAAs. I'm tempted to try it, but then I wonder why it isn't a popular product and why BCAAs are, if it's so superior to regular aminos. Thank you for your time. Your answer is greatly appreciated. Keep up the killer podcast, Cody.
Well, Cody, we talked about BCAAs a while ago. I think I personally don't recommend BCAAs unless it's in context of maybe a deficient diet in protein, which shouldn't be, and most of the people listening to this podcast, we should all be getting sufficient protein. Or if you're training fasted, then by all means take them. But most people that would eat a meal 1, 2, 3 hours before training are going to have enough amino acids in the bloodstream, and thus I wouldn't take them unless you weren't going to eat for maybe a couple of hours afterwards. And again, it was a convenient way to send a muscle stimulus to say, keep growing, to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And then HMB, HMB was actually popular quite a while ago, about 15 years ago. It was really popular, especially in the old school bodybuilding world. And it was kind of heralded to maintain muscle mass. Now, in guys like you and me, we're training all the time, or relatively regularly. That's the best way to hold on to muscle mass, by weight training. We don't really need extra supplementation. Now, the only data that I've seen that's positive from HMB are for people that are injured, and in that injured state they can take HMB and it seems to help them maintain or hang on to a bit more muscle mass. Now, I haven't seen the recent work by Dr. Jason Wilson. That would obviously be interesting. For me, if I ever look at a singular supplement like HMB, I would go to examine.com and I would get the answer. These are the guys that have compiled all the research. The work they've done is fantastic. So I would go and look up HMB, see what they've got to say, and make an opinion on whether you think it's a supplement that you should include in your diet or not.
I have nothing further to add. Perfectly summarised.
And if we're unsure, if any of you are unsure about any nutrient like vitamin C, creatine, BCAAs, whey protein, whatever it might be, go to examine.com, look it up, do a bit of research. They have a great rundown of the research and their rationale. And they've even got, when the research isn't sure and there's some positive indications, they're even like, we think it could be beneficial. It's worth a go if you've got some cash, but we're not 100% sure on the research right now. And I really respect that, because sometimes you have to hypothesize certain theories before it actually becomes fact, and you kind of draw conclusions based on what we know of physiology, biochemistry, and how the body works in certain ways. So if you're unsure, drop by examine.com, have a look. They're a great resource.
Examine is awesome. It's such a time saver now. Gone are the days where you used to have to go on PubMed and look these things up yourself. It's all just done for you. Type it in, it's there.
It is.
Awesome.
Right, that is us for a wrap. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. The next guest on this podcast is, I don't know, I haven't organised it yet, I'm going to be honest. But me and Rachel will be back in 2 weeks. Rachel, thanks for being on the show, as ever.
Thank you for having me.
And if you want to find more of us online, Rachel is Athletic Fox on all the social networks. I am Ben Coomber. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it with someone. Tag us into Facebook, have a chat, ask a question, expand on the topic. Engage, please engage. It's cool. It's what we want. We don't want the conversation to fall on deaf ears. Let's have it fall on ears that want to chat about this kind of stuff online. We are here. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Stay awesome. Ciao.
Ciao.
Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 157, if my brain cellulars serve me properly. Now, we've been with you guys for a long time, me and Rachel, me and Anna, various different guests, and we've talked a lot about the nuts and bolts of training.